Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Scares That Shaped Us, a podcast about horror writers and the stories that made them. I'm your host, Matthew Jackson. We are 8 days into October, and it is still hotter than hell in Texas, but that has not stopped me from getting into Halloween spirit. Hope you're having a good October. I have been very busy writing essays for my new series, Tracing the Shape, over at my newsletter, which you can find at MatthewJacksonWrites.com. That's writes as in WRITES, because I'm a writer, get it? Tracing the Shape is 31 days of essays, one for every day in October, about my favorite horror movie of all time, John Carpenter's Halloween. I have written 8 of them now. They're so much fun. I'm having a great time unpacking this amazing movie. Not quite scene by scene, but moment by moment, theme by theme. We get a little weird with some of them. We're more straightforward with others. It's a really fun time. If you have not checked that out yet, please go over to MatthewJacksonWrites.com. Do me a favor, put your email in, sign up for the newsletter. You get all 31 installments of Tracing the Shape for free, along with a bunch of other stuff like book reviews, essays, and things that I'm doing over there. There's a lot more to come. There are also paid tiers you can chip in as little as $1 a month to help us out and help the show out. But you don't have to do that. You can also get lots of cool content for free, including this essay series that I'm doing that has been an absolute blast. I have also started a new set of TV recaps at popheist.com. I am recapping Brian Fuller's amazing classic crime psychosexual drama horror show Hannibal, which is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. It was my favorite show on TV for the 3 years that it was on the air. It remains one of my favorite TV shows. I am having so much fun digging back into that gorgeously rendered 39 episodes of TV. So if you're a fanable like me, you can head over to Pop Heist. Those are subscriber exclusive recaps. You can subscribe to Pop Heist for $7 a month and support a worker-owned and writer-driven website that is not dictated by algorithms. We write about what we want, what we're passionate about. We're having a lot of fun. Hope you join us and support us. We have a great show for you this week. Our guest is C. Robert Cargill. We are going to talk to him about his latest film, The Black Phone 2. We're also going to talk about the story that he had in The End of the World as We Know It, the amazing new anthology of short fiction about Stephen King's The Stand. And we're going to talk about The Stand, and specifically one very special chapter in The Stand that changed Cargill's life as a writer forever, and also changed my life as a writer forever. I was lucky enough to meet Cargill at Fantastic Fest, and he was kind enough to facilitate this interview. This is one of the biggest guests we've ever had on the show. It was so much fun talking to him. It's a great conversation. So, without further ado, let's head over to our interview with C. Robert Cargill. Joining us this week on The Scares That Shaped Us is one of the most successful writers in modern horror across books and films. He is the author of books like Dreams and Shadows, Queen of the Dark Things, We Are Where the Nightmares Go, and Other Stories, and Day Zero. He is also the co-writer behind hit films like Sinister, The Black Phone, and Black Phone 2, which you can catch in theaters everywhere October 17th. C. Robert Cargill, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for doing this. As a fellow Austin film guy, like I've seen you around at screenings for years, and when I started doing the podcast, I was like, well, maybe we could get Cargill. Maybe he would be up for it. And you were kind enough when I just sort of cold called you on Blue Sky to hook this up. So we appreciate you.
Yeah, sure thing.
So I want to start by talking about Black Phone 2 because I saw this at Fantastic Fest at the world premiere. I like The Black Phone. I like Joe Hill's story. I like the film you guys made. I love Black Phone 2. I'm still wrapping my head around why I love it, why it hit so hard for me, and it might just be the snow. It might be the whole Christian camp blizzard thing. It might be the even more supernatural stuff that you're playing with. Where does Black Phone 2... obviously, I'm sure that Universal saw the grosses for the Black Phone and went, hey, Black Phone 2, huh? But in terms of a story, where does Black Phone 2 begin for you?
Well, I mean, yeah, no, Universal was like, yeah, we would love to do this. And I got a call from Scott, specifically being like, hey, these kids aren't getting any younger. If we want to do this, we've got to do this. And he and I, had a talk and I laid it out. I was very disappointed with what happened with Sinister 2. You can really say this all goes back to Sinister 2. While I was making Sinister, Jason Blum had lunch with me, and we're in the tent in between, during lunch, and he sells me on the idea. He's like, look, if we make a second one, it's gonna make money, and if we make a second one, we got to make a third one. If we make a third one, we absolutely make a fourth one, and then your family is taken care of. And that's a big thing you think about. I'm deeply in love with my wife, and if I were to get hit by a bus, it would be really nice if I left her behind, something to where she never had to work another day in her life that she didn't want to. And so, that's a great motivator. And so I was like, okay, let me start thinking about what a second Sinister movie could be. And then just everything conspired against that movie. That movie was just cursed in so many ways, and so many things went wrong. There were so many bad choices in so many different directions. So much so I did an entire podcast about it with Scott Weinberg. If you check out his Overhated podcast, you can listen to me for half an hour explain how everything went wrong. And it just did. And so when this came around, the question was, Black Phone 2. And I was like, absolutely not. Not unless we have a great idea. If we have a great idea, we've got the right team and we do this, then I'm down to do it. I'm not ready to hand it off to someone else. If we make this, it's got to be me and Scott. And Scott's like, I agree. And so we just kind of laid out, look, if there's a great idea, we'll do it. And that's it. And then a week later, I get a text from Joe Hill, and he's like, I got to talk to you about something. And I was like, all right. And he calls me up. I was like, I have the dumbest idea. I'm like, great. We love dumb ideas. Dumb ideas are the best ideas. And so he's like, okay, so a phone rings, Finn answers it, and it's the grabber calling him from hell. And I was like, oh, well, that's a movie. I know how to write that. Like now, that's something I've never seen before in horror, to where we've literally set up the mechanism in the first movie for the dead antagonist to return in the next movie. And now I'm asking real questions that excite me. Like, why is he back? What would he do? How would he do this? What would happen to him? How would he internalize what's going on? There's a lot that, there's going to be a lot of dissection about this after the fact, about certain issues with the movie, and not issues like problems, but certain things that come up.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that, there's already been discussion in several reviews about our position on the cosmology and how this film works with its rules. And the thing is so far, everybody's wrong. We don't have definitive rules on this. And it's all experiential from the various characters. And the characters, as we've described from the beginning of the first film, is as you die, certain things are stripped away from your soul, and memories are one of the first things to go. And one of the first things you lose is your core identity. And so, how you internalize this and what you do, we have this villain. There's certainly, I won't go into right now. I was about to get into spoiler territory, and let's not do that. It's too early for that.
Right.
Have me back on later, and I will dissect the cosmology of this. But yeah, so the idea being that there is getting to play around with how does this, what happens to this guy when he goes to the afterlife and has enough rage in him to stick around and come back, and how does that work, and what's his master plan, and is his master plan too convoluted for a spirit, or is it right on the money, and how do the kids play into it, and yada yada. That's all stuff we wanted to address, and that was exciting to think about. And so I really got into it and dug into it with Scott, and we went back and forth and through lots of ideas, a lot of ideas that hit the ground and never made it to the page. The first half of a draft that we wrote, with based on, we were like, oh, well, let's put our all ideas in and see what it looks like. And I got 50 pages in and said, you got to read this and front to back. And he went, there's too many ideas here. I said, yes, there are. And so we just started paring out and killing a lot of darlings and being like, hey, we've got to cut this out. We got to cut this element out. and we had to go bare bones because there was a lot of meat on, for those few bones we were putting in there. And so that's essentially where it began, and fruited out. And then we wrote and we wrote and we wrote, and we knew that we had a very large audience to satisfy on this, and we're both hardcore horror fans. So when we came into this, the question of how do you make a film worthy of its audience was the driving force. It's very easy to make a sequel to a successful film. It's very easy to kind of smear on the things that people liked about the first film, and that's why so many of those sequels are not good. Everybody from the top of the studio on down has an opinion on what worked with the first film, and you got to have that, and you got to do this, you got to have that, you got to have that. It's something we've talked about in rebooting Sinister over the years, and bringing in new things, is nobody can agree on what a Sinister film is. It's literally an argument we've been having. Does a Sinister film have to involve kids? Does it have to involve the ghoul? Can it involve any of the other gods that are addressed in the movies? Can it be adults dealing with this, or does it have to be murderous children? Like, what do audience want when they go in to see that movie? And so one of the chief reasons we don't have a third Sinister film or a Sinister TV series is nobody can quite agree on what that would even mean. And so that became, a lot of the cheap discussions around Black Phone 2 of, what is it that makes it work? And we had a bead on really what made it work in terms of what we loved about it and what we wanted to do. And we were like, look, if nobody else wants to do what we want to do, then we won't make a sequel. They paid us for a sequel, we can continue developing with someone else. But this, we don't think we want to make something we don't want to make. We've been down that road before, and we don't want to do it again. And so yeah, but as it turns out, everyone along the way really got what we were doing. They, Universal got behind us, had minimal notes. Blumhouse got 100% behind us, had almost no notes. And we, trucked on through, and it was a hard film to shoot, but we shot it and got it all in the can eventually. and then now people are really connecting with it, and people are really excited for it. And it's a very weird time to be watching how this, small nascent thing that me and Scott originally started as a side project, spun into something so large.
So you mentioned the importance of experiential horror through the eyes of the characters, and I think that in talking about what makes Black Phone work, I do think that Finney and Gwen are the core of what makes it work. I think a lot of people would go to the grabber, but for me, it's Finney and Gwen, and you start these characters in very different places, which is something I love about the film. Like, it's not a hard reset. They're not back to the same. They're not the same people they were, and it's apparent right away that they're not the same people they were in Black Phone 2. And I think that Mason and Madeline do incredible work, especially Madeline in this movie. Do you tend to start when you're working through something like this? Does it begin with character? Does it begin with concept? When you're doing that thing where you're throwing out all of the ideas, what are the ideas most rooted in to begin the story?
Well, I mean, this is horror. So the thing with horror is it's got to be rooted in the idea. The idea is what get people to watch the movie. It's what, when we sit down, this is a horror film podcast, right?
Yeah.
A horror podcast in general. So these are all horror lovers. So when you sit down to watch a horror movie on a Friday night, or a Tuesday night for that matter, as we do, we sit down and we ask ourselves, what kind of horror do I want tonight? We don't just say, I want a horror movie. We have an idea of what kind of horror movie we want to watch. And when we're in that mood, not just any horror movie is going to do. If you're in the mood for something mean and nasty, a Texas Chainsaw, a Dolly, something like that, you're going to want to watch that, and Tucker and Dale isn't going to do it for you. Meanwhile, if you're in the mood for something lighter and more fun and scary, the Texas Chainsaws aren't going to do it. It's you gotta, sometimes you're in the mood for Spook House, sometimes you want alien, abduction horror. I want to see a single person with no words for almost 90 minutes. Like, give me that. We all have our various things that we're into. And so you got to start with that core idea first. What is this horror movie? Where does it fit? What genre is it? And then build out from there, knowing what tools you have. Now, one of the secrets of being a writer is making it feel like it started from either the idea or the character, and you can't tell. Like, that's just being a writer. That is a core thing. It is character is every bit as important as idea. And the balance of which is one of the cores of being a writer. There's this whole spectrum that I like to talk about, where at one end of the spectrum you have your indie darlings. These are your half Nelsons, your critically acclaimed films that are about character and have almost no story at all. The story is all about the problems the character has. And on the other side, you have Inception, which is all plot and almost no characters at all. There is one three-dimensional character in Inception, and that is our main character. And the rest of the characters are literally one-dimensional characters. They have a name, they have a single personality quirk, and they serve the story. They don't have any real conflict with each other or with the story at all. They just serve our protagonist. And that's by design. And both of these versions work. You just have to know how to balance it. When you get a movie that doesn't work, oftentimes you find that the balance is out of whack. You've got too much character in your big idea movie, or you've got too many ideas in your character driven movie. You've got to find that perfect balance. So you got to do that with this too. So when you start off with your horror idea, you've got your idea, you've got your genre, you know where you're going, and you start building out your characters to balance out how big an idea you have. Are you going to have to spend half the movie explaining the idea to the audience? If you do, you need thinner, more accessible characters. Here, we knew we wanted to make this as a character piece. So we knew the ideas needed to be smaller, more contained, readily easily to understand, so that we could have all this runway to talk about characters. And in fact, when you get the Blu-ray or DVD of this with extra features, you're going to find about half a dozen very scenes we love that we had to cut from the movie, all character stuff. We just loaded this thing with character and cut back to the bone to get what would be a propulsive film that had that perfect balance of character and idea. But so you start with the idea, and then you build the characters around that, and it needs to feel organic. It needs to feel like every choice that gets made that moves the plot along, the characters made. And that it just the audience can never feel like, well, of course they've got to do this, or else we don't have a movie. That's always the worst, the worst question somebody asks out. Well, why did this happen? It's like, well, because if that didn't happen, they don't have a movie. And I get your complaint, but can we just enjoy the movie? The best version of that is making it feel where nobody asks that question at all, where nobody goes, why are they going to this youth camp? Of course they had to go to the youth camp. That's why. Like, there's all these, there is a lingering mystery. There's a lot of questions. Of course they have to go. If they don't know, they're just going to sit around wondering, they're driven to do it. That's why. And so that's where all of this came from, was trying to make all of that happen organically while trying to figure out what the grabber's doing is more than just, a vengeful ghost. Like the grabber what's great about the grabber was always very thoughtful. So even in death, there would be preparation, even if parts of him are stripped away. And so we wanted all of it to feel like you could draw a line from the beginning of the first movie to the end of the last movie and follow those arcs with these characters. And so we were very excited. I mean, the main reason I was excited to revisit this movie was to work with the kids again, was to revisit these characters. I've loved writing these characters the first time. I loved writing them the second time. If we make a third movie, and that's a big if there's a good enough idea, it's gotta be, it'll be to work with these kids again and to work with these characters again and revisit them. That's the chief reason to do this.
I want everyone to go see Black Phone 2 on October 17th, because I need to know what kind of conceptual leaps that Cargill and Scott Derrickson and Joe Hill will take with Black Phone 3 if that happens.
And that's it's like
If
seriously huge if. That's not
yeah,
even a tease. I am dead serious. I am the same
yeah.
way I was in the second film. Like,
I know
yeah.
you have a ton of other stuff that you want to make.
Oh
But
yeah.
I wanna circle back to Scott for a moment because if I'm counting correctly, this is the fifth feature that you two have released as co-writers at this up to this point. Um,
Let's see. As co-writers, without him directing, that would be Sinister, Sinister 2, VHS 85, Black Phone 2, Doctor Strange, and we are uncredited, but we worked together as writers for quite some time on The Gorge.
oh right,
So
yeah.
that
Which he
should be seven
yeah. So
as writers
yeah.
together.
Uh, so it's a working relationship going back well over a decade at this point.
Decade and a half.
How has your as writers, as two guys who are sitting down banging out a story together, how has that relationship evolved and changed from Sinister to Black Phone 2?
Oh, I mean, it's night and day. Like, we used to argue quite a bit, and not in a bad way, but in a, just the way that Scott and I are both. The reason we work together so well is we are so incredibly passionate about the quality of the product. And I mean product in the most general sense, not in a, because it's I know there's a lot of pushback about things like product and content and things like that, but I have a podcast, I write novels, I write movies, I do a whole bunch of other side projects. It's easy to put it all in one word, and now I've added 100 words to explain the one word I used, so I have failed. Sorry about that, but we're so obsessed with the quality of the end result that we're always fighting to protect it all the way through. And anybody who's ever talks about like, oh, working with them, they were a little persnickety, they were a little dialed in, it's because we really care about the end result. We're here to make great stuff. We're not here to be famous. We're not here to be just for the money. We'd be doing this if we weren't getting paid. We would be obsessively making our own stuff and be just as obsessed about the quality of it. I mean, it's just we love this stuff so much, we never want to make a bad thing, and whenever we do, it becomes a thorn in our side and haunts us for years. So we're always trying to make the best thing we can. And so at first, it was a lot of big pushback. But over the years, what happened was we learned to realize when the other was pushing back and why. And we learned to speak each other's language and learn to trust one another to where, where in early on, I'd be writing a thing, Scott would just cut it and be like, this is useless. I don't know why you're writing this. This is extra. And he would come to learn that, oh, you were laying track for a thing that's going to happen 2 acts down the road. Like, you were setting that up. And I just thought it was pat because it felt like it was out of place because you were doing more than one thing at a time. And he would start to realize whenever it feels like I'm juggling things in a scene, there's usually a reason for it. And if he's questioning it before he cuts it, he'll give me a call or a text and be like, hey, what are you doing with this? And I'll be like, oh, I'm setting this up for later so that when this comes up, so that it's already there and we don't have to go back and alter something. And he'll be like, oh, that's great. Okay, I know how to work around that. And so if he has rewrites for it, he'll rewrite around those bits that he realizes I'm laying track for. And so it ends up creating this positive feedback loop of just constantly improving one another and trusting one another until we get to the end and we look at the end result and goes, wow, that works. And so it's just become there's a lot less talking back and forth now because we just speak each other's language on the page. And we know how to, if we need to leave a note for the other person, we just leave it right there in the script and don't need to bother texting and or calling, and we just have this shorthand between us when we're working, and a level of trust that also from the beginning he's had me behind the monitor with him whenever he's directing. And so if something isn't working, he has no problem with me leaning over and talking to him about it, or he'll turn to me and go, what's not working here? And I'll be like, oh, well, if you remember when we wrote the scene, we had this situated like this to create this for, and he's like, oh, that's what, okay. And then he'll go and amend the scene. But yeah, it's just, there's become a lot of trust and shorthand between us that just allows us to work very quickly and efficiently with one another.
With all that experience on set behind the monitor in mind, do you ever see yourself directing a feature, or are you more comfortable letting Scott do that?
You know, I don't know. I get that question. I've been getting it on and off for 15 years. And, sometimes I'm very positive about it. Sometimes I'm very negative about it. It all depends on my mood of the day. Today I'm kind of indifferent. The thing is would I love to direct at some point? Yeah. Not because I want to be a director, but because there's a couple things I've got banging around in my head that if they ever want to come to fruition, I feel like they're the type of things that only I can make because they come completely out of my aesthetic and sensibilities. They aren't Scott movies. Anything that's a Scott movie, I want Scott to direct because Scott's fucking great. I love working with Scott. He's an incredibly talented filmmaker, and why wouldn't I want him directing my stuff? I love being a writer, and he and I actually talked about this 7 years ago. We were at a film festival, and I had been offered the possibility to direct. Someone had offered me $400,000 to direct whatever I wanted and wrote. Just had to be contained, could be made for under $400,000, and it'd be my movie, and they had distribution locked. And so I talked to Scott. Do I want to do that? Do I want to make a cool small little thing? And he was like, if you want to do it, I'll be your producer. I'll make a movie with you. If you want to direct, hell yeah, I'm there with you. But I don't think you want to direct. I think you really like staying at home with your wife and your dog and writing 5 or 6 things a year and going out to your garage to work and not spending an entire year over pouring your soul into just one thing. And I was like, yeah, no, that is exactly who I am. And so I kind of put that aside for a while. But recently it's been like, well, maybe I make something, and not something big. I have no intention on becoming a director. But like, for example, I was just hanging out with Jason Lee Howden here at Fantastic Fest, and he doesn't consider himself a director. Directing is his hobby. He is a VFX supervisor, and he is a great VFX supervisor, and has done work on a lot of your favorite films, and done really amazing scenes that are part of the zeitgeist. And that's what he considers his job to be. He just every once in a while likes going and making his wild ass low budget movies, and making his zombie comedies and things like Guns Akimbo. But that's not what he wants to be remembered for. That's not that's part of who he is, but he's a VFX supervisor, and I'm a writer, and I'm always going to be a writer. So if I direct, it'll be something that I do the same way I've done some of my other side projects, where I do it because I love doing it and because it's fun and because I get to make a cool piece of art, but not because I ever plan on becoming a director. If I die and I'm remembered as director and writer, I will have failed. I am first and foremost a writer. I've been a writer since I was 8 years old. I will be a writer until death. And so that's kind of the crux of it.
Hell yeah. So as I try to cleverly segue into our topic, you've been talking about your side projects. One of my favorite of your projects that you've had out this year is a short story in the massive anthology The End of the World as We Know It, New Tales of Stephen King's The Stand. We had Chris Golden and Brian Keene here on the show over the summer to talk about editing that amazing anthology. So when I found out that you wanted to talk about The Stand, I was like, oh, this is a nice sort of nesting doll thing that we're doing, building that. We have the editors of the anthology here to talk about The Stand. Now we have one of the most prominent writers in the anthology talking about The Stand. I guess I want to start just with your relationship to The Stand itself as a novel. When do you first remember encountering that book?
I was 13 years old. So I was already a hardcore Stephen King fan at 13. I first encountered him when I was 8. And this all goes back to my origin story. Because you had specifically, you wanted me to talk about what media inspired me and,
yes,
helped create me. And that's Stephen King. I had a huge crush on Drew Barrymore. We are the exact same age. So I was just at that right point in 1982, 1983, 1984 that she was on the cover of our Scholastic magazines. Like, she was our age, so they were mainline pipelining her right into her core audience as kids. And I had the biggest crush on her, and I was really excited to see her new movie. I saw a trailer for it. I was like, I really want to see this, and begged my parents, take me to see this. My parents were very open about us seeing rated R movies as long as they didn't have nudity in it. That was their big thing.
Yeah.
So they were like, Blue Thunder, yeah, sure, we'll just cover the TV with a towel when the nude yoga happens. After that, it's just people getting shot. That's fine. Very American family. So I was like, I want to see this. And my parents like, we're not taking our son to go see a Stephen King movie. You are 8. Stop it. And I was like, no, I really want to see it. Well, my parents wouldn't take me to see it. Well, that Christmas, my aunt bought me the copy of the book, the novel, the novel Firestarter. And it had Drew Barrymore right there on the cover. And, my parents were like, why are you giving our kid a Stephen King novel? And my aunt was just like, look, he's not going to read it. He's going to look at the picture of the girl on the cover. He's got a crush. Okay. Just let him have his crush. Well, I read that thing cover to cover 3 times. And by the 3rd time I was reading it, I was like, this Stephen King guy, he makes his living writing these books. I want to do that that's what I want to do. I want to write these for a living. And that was what gestated my interest in writing. And so, on again, off again over the years, nobody takes a 9, 10, 12-year-old seriously when they say, I'm going to be a writer. It's just one of those things like, I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to be a policeman. I'm going to be an astronaut. It's like, that's cute. Well, sure enough, I started devouring everything I could get my hands on. My mother, instantly realizing that, I was a reader, was like, all right, if you're going to be reading novels, we're going to start you off right. She put The Hobbit in my hands. And so that also helped. And being a child of the early 80s, now I'm a huge hardcore fantasy nerd, like, horror and fantasy, let's go. And you couldn't get away from science fiction at the time. So of course, hardcore science fiction fan. So yeah, I am a genre nerd. By the time I have hit double digits and ready to go. And so I'm going through all the King and, going through all the classics, the ones that I've been hearing about as movies. That's where you start. You start with you do The Shining, you do Christine, you do Cujo, and you read through those. And then eventually they put out, they had a big relaunch as they were putting out the extended edition of The Stand, where Stephen had finally gotten, it had been such a big hit and been out so long that he convinced everybody, let me just put out my version with all the stuff my editor forced me to cut. And are you pulling that off your shelf right now?
Yes, indeed.
And it's a controversial pick. Like, that's the thing, is it's in terms of a book, my former or my editor over at Harper Voyager, her husband was Stephen's editor on The Stand. And they had big long disagreements on it. He was very much like, you need to cut chunks of this book out. It's got to be more propulsive. You spend way too much time with too many characters. And so it really is a book that the fans who love it after they've read the original version. If you start with it, it can grind to a halt over time. And so it's one of those weird books that it's worth reading. It's almost like the Silmarillion of Stand, which I find amusing. Yeah, there's a lot more lore, there's a lot more character in there, and if that's what you want, you get it. But it's already an extraordinarily long book. But so I got that book and read it and devoured it and fell in love with it. But then I got to chapter 38, and chapter 38 as a writer just hit me like a fist, and I had never ever forgotten it. And that was, to me, it didn't matter how the rest of the book went. Chapter 38 was this revelation where the clouds parted, the sun came through, it lit me up, and all of a sudden I was like, I get it, I see it now, I understand storytelling. And this one chapter, this small little chapter, that is almost kind of a throwaway interstitial chapter, just completely changed my life and fundamentally restructured my understanding of how a story gets told.
So we actually talked about this a bit at Fantastic Fest, but as Cargill mentioned, listeners, I did just pull my copy of the complete and uncut edition of The Stand off of my shelf. It is always with me. I bought this in a used bookstore in Temple, Texas when I was 15. And it's the only version of The Stand I've ever actually read. I keep telling myself that I'm going to go back and read the shorter version and just sort of compare, but it's never happened. And weirdly, I think I told Chris and Brian this was my first King novel. I went into the bookstore, and it was the first time that my parents were going to let me buy a Stephen King novel because I had been hearing about him for years. My everyone around me was reading him, but I wasn't allowed to. And I said, "Where's your Stephen King?" And they said, "Oh, in back there on the hardcovers are back there on the shelf." I went, and immediately The Stand just jumped. The title is just so evocative. The Stand. It's such a strong title, and it's this massive book. And I grabbed it because I just went, uh, well, this, I mean, it's huge. How could I not just dive right into this? It's probably not the best idea for a first King novel, but uh, I did love it, and I have gone back to it several times. And you mentioned chapter 38, so we can get into this now because this is something I told you at Fantastic Fest when I found out that you wanted to talk about this chapter specifically. There are pieces of writing that I did as a teenager after reading this book that were direct, just blatant ripoffs of the structure of this chapter, the way this chapter uh, drills the horror of mass death into you in a way that no other chapter does, even the ones that follow characters in a very intimate way. I was deliberately like, oh, this is how you write stuff. And I was just doing this riff in stuff that I was writing forever because it hit me so hard. Um, Chapter 38, for those who don't know, is a chapter about the other people who survived the super flu but did not survive life after the super flu. So they
you
made
could
it
best you could best whenever anybody asks me, wait, what is chapter 38? I just go, no great loss.
no
And
great
if you've
loss.
read the book, you know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yes. It is all about these people who are just trying to figure out how to survive in a world that is the civilization they knew is gone, and they're just trying to get through whatever this is. And they all die in ways ranging from very mundane to very dramatic, but they're by themselves, so no one really knows that they died. No one is there to mourn them. No one is there to help them or hold their hand. They just go, and it's so devastating. Like you said, it is one of those things that if you're someone attuned to writing and stories and you read that chapter, your brain just immediately lights on fire in a way that nothing else in this book does. And there's so much in this book that'll light your brain on fire. um what part of it hits you the hardest, do you think?
Well, I mean, it is the entirety of that chapter is an exercise in both what ifs and in setup and payoff.
Yes.
Every single story here is a setup and payoff. And it is the perfect base outline that is that perfect base outline that just perfectly encapsulates what every great horror story should be. We get a beginning, and we've got the setup from the novel, and the novel is, hey, here's Captain Trips. Captain Trips is killing everybody. This is a chapter about what about the people that it doesn't kill, that aren't our main characters, what happens to them. And so you get to play around with a bunch of different stories, like, because essentially this is a riff on a post-apocalyptic world. We are in a post-apocalyptic world now, and here's all the things you never see in a post-apocalyptic movie is just the random ways people die, because people die every day to random ass shit. But then King emotionally connects us to every character in one way, shape, or form. Always. Whether we love them by the time they die, whether we feel pity for them, whether we hate them. There's a character in this that she is a tragic kind of character in terms of the inherent misogyny of our culture, in which it's this teenage girl who, gets knocked up by this college boy who, she was just so happy to get attention from college boy. And he's not the first guy she slept with. She's a teenage girl living her teenage life, but this guy knocks her up. and their parents then take over their lives, and she is stuck in this marriage, and it's a relatively loveless marriage, and she has a kid, and she loves her kid, but the kid is a representation of that marriage. And then everyone around her dies from Captain Trips, and she feels a great weight lifted off her, even though it's mentioned in passing that she felt really sad about her little boy dying for 2 or 3 days, but then got over it. And the very fact that she got over it tells you everything you need to know about this person, that she is an emotionally disconnected person. And by the time she has her tragic death, that is all tied into this life that she did not want. That is, she's going down and visiting the corpses of her family kept in the deep freeze, as if to gloat. And then she gets trapped in the freezer. And you get a whole host of emotions in there in this very small, short little snippet. And then now we're moving on, and now we're talking about this little this toddler, that what happens to the toddler when his family dies. He doesn't know what's going on around him, and he ends up falling down a well and dying. And then you get a junkie who, the world's ending. I'll bet you I could really score from that drug dealer, not knowing what he's doing, and he ends up dying tragically. And you get the jogger whose entire family has died. He was a teacher at school, had 12 kids, used to joke about that he can't even keep his kid's name straight, but the truth is he not only remembers all their names, he remembers in what order they died. And he just goes out running, and he can't kill himself, and he wants nothing more than to be with his family in the afterlife. And he just runs and runs and runs until his heart finally gives out. And it's tragic in its own way, and you feel nothing but sorrow for that man, but also kind of a small rejoice at the happiness he feels in the elation in the last moment of his life, as he's passing away and gets to, in some way, shape, or form, whether there is an afterlife or not, be with his family, which is all he really cares about. And so it's just one after another of setup and payoff, setup and payoff, setup and payoff. And it perfectly illustrates the type of story you need to tell as a horror storyteller, whether it's on the page or in film. It is all setup and payoff. And it is all character development. If you give us a little bit of tragedy in that character, even at the last moment, we will suddenly have a tremendous feeling of emotion connected to someone that A, doesn't exist, but B, a moment ago we didn't give two shits about as a character. I ended up completely making an homage to this entire chapter in my very first book, Dreams and Shadows. There's this chapter where I tell the story from the point of view of these campers interacting with our main character fairies, and how it ends up leading to all of their deaths. And in each of their final moments, I've really kind of set up who they are and have you feel tragic for these characters that moments ago were just the assholes intruding, trouncing upon nature and being kind of the antagonists in their own way to our characters, and getting to feel that tragedy there, because that was something I wanted to make an homage to because of how profound I felt about this chapter that King had written, 30 years, I had read it 30 years before, I'd written this. And then, so it really is one of those things that just connected to me on a profound level of understanding of how to do that. And this is a masterclass. It is a perfect masterclass. You can read this chapter, and then I can say, go write your own story about a survivor of Captain Trips, and you can write one of these things. If you've studied this close enough, you can write something like it, drawing from your own experience, drawing from the way you tell stories that can fit in here. And so when I was invited to write in this book, The End of the World as We Know It, I was like, well, I'm writing my chapter 38. I'm writing that great story about, for me, it wasn't about how can I create characters that can connect to the big grand narrative or end up in Vegas or end up at the farm. For me, it was like, I want to talk about those characters that don't. And I want to write that story that is just that little bit out of place, that little slice of life in King's post-apocalyptic world, that I connect with, and that, I wanted to pour myself a little bit and pour my friends into that universe. And that's where that story came from. And it all comes from chapter 38.
Yeah. So Cargill story listeners, if you haven't read the anthology, which you should because it's all great, it is called Wrong Fucking Place, Wrong Fucking Time. It is set in Roosevelt, Texas, which is a tiny, tiny place on Interstate 10 that I have definitely driven through more
Oh
than
yeah,
once.
yeah,
Um, and
a
it is
real ghost town.
yeah, absolutely. And it is a story about a couple of guys who realize that they're kind of the probably the only ones left in town, and they don't really want to leave necessarily. They have each other, and more importantly, they have the video store and enough electricity left on the grid to sit around every evening and watch horror movies together. And it is your chapter 38 because it is about these people who just made it through and they are trying to live whatever kind of life they can with what they have left. But there is so much warmth and hope in it. There's so much it's such a delightful it is. I mean, you talked about not wanting to play with the big characters, and so you don't. You stay here in this little corner of Texas, but the same like warm fuzzy feeling that you get from reading about the survivors in Boulder, like putting their little world back together, you get in 12 pages or whatever it is, reading about these two guys who are just like, we have the movies, man, at least we have the movies. um did it start with I mean, obviously we know where it started because you said you wanted to do your chapter 38. Was it always just about two guys watching movies? How did this story how do you go about how do short stories work in your imagination since you're so well known for novels and features?
Oh well, I mean the a great short story. Like the thing is one of the big questions I get asked as a writer is how do you decide what format something belongs in?
Right.
And the answer is you figure out how much story you have that's good. One of the things people do is they'll get a great idea and then they will try to shoehorn it into whatever medium they prefer. And a lot of times that doesn't work. Sometimes a short story is a short story. Sometimes it is a novella. Sometimes it is a novel. Sometimes it's a movie. Sometimes it's a TV series. Knowing how much runway you have with those characters, how many ideas you have to unpack, you can very easily figure out where something goes. And the great thing about a short story in particular is a short story can end any way you want it to. A short story doesn't have to follow 3-act structure. It does not have to have play by the same rules. It does not have to have be anything more than two guys in a room talking. I have a short story in my previous novella called Jake and Willie at the End of the World, which is literally just two redneck dumb shits at the during an apocalypse. We never fully divulge what it is, but their last few minutes of hanging out, drinking beers, and cleaning their shotguns, waiting for whatever it is to come through the door. And you can tell a story like that. And so with this, I had a core idea. I had an interesting idea about guys who are, really inspired by movies and filmmaking and how that would lead to them in the after, in the post-apocalypse. And I had an idea that, I had these ideas for characters and I was playing around with that. And I had a direction I wanted to go, but I wasn't sure about it. So I pitched it to Chris and Brian, and who both of whom I've known for a very long time. In fact, Brian Keene was the very first person back in 2008 to approach me and say, Cargill, why aren't you writing for Marvel? Why aren't you putting out novels? Why aren't you writing screenplays? Why are you just writing movie reviews? You are clearly a really talented writer. You should be writing professionally outside of film critique. He was the first person to do that and inspired me to start working on my first novel. So Brian has a special place in my heart as being, outside of my wife, of course, but, somebody in the field who you just know professionally comes to you and says, you should be doing more. That was a huge thing for me. So, of course, going to them and saying, hey, I've got this idea. And I'm kind of torn at the end here. I don't know which direction I'm going. And they said, ooh, we don't have anything that goes in this direction. Why don't you go that direction? And so that became, all right, I have a North Star. Because the one of the things I was thinking about was, I was torn between, do they go on the road Mad Max style and just kind of, experience the world while being inspired to create all these things based on the movies? or do they decide to stay there and just be couch potatoes and enjoy life? So I was given those two directions, and I chose one. And so I ended up going with the latter, and really kind of building that out. What's the best way to tell that story? What's the most fulfilling way to tell that story? What gets us to that ending to be a satisfying ending? And so of course that made me very much realize Bill was the character we really needed to evolve in that story, and spend time with, and his tragedy and him getting over that tragedy through these guys. And so that's very much what it became. And so at that point, I already knew I wanted to play around with, one of the weird things about The Stand is The Stand was written in the 70s.
Yeah.
But it was set in 1987. So I then get to include media in The Stand that didn't exist when The Stand was written. So I get to very much play around with the fact that, okay, we're going into 1988. What do we have on the docket that we can, what's part of the zeitgeist? What is the fabric of horror at that time? And what would two horror nerds be watching on a Tuesday night, as a double feature? And so, given the fact that they have access to a very large video store. And so that became a lot of fun to play around with, and then to weave that into the theme, and to, have that conversation of something that all of us horror fans have had in the past, exposing someone who's not into horror but enjoys it, and kind of getting their feet wet and introducing them. What happens the first time you show your friend Night of the Creeps, and they flip and they're like, oh my God, that's, and start quoting it, because how do you not quote that movie was, for us horror fans in the 80s, had one of the greatest trailer lines of the 80s. Girls, good news is your dates are here.
Bad news is they're dead.
They're dead. Like, see, I mean, it's baked into us. And so getting to play around with that kind of stuff, and also like the nostalgia of it, the fact that one of the characters is drinking Stroh's, a beer that doesn't exist anymore, but in the 80s you couldn't get away from. Everybody knew who Alex from Stroh's was, so much so that it's in a popular hit song at the time. But if you ask kids today who Alex from Stroh's is, they'd be like, some dude who likes beer. And it's like, oh no, he's a dog. He is a golden retriever, and he is adorable, and he has good taste in beer, supposedly. But being able to kind of play around with those references, the kind of stuff that I grew up with, but also get to write a love letter to my community, all the mutant fam out there, all the people who love going to drive-ins and watch Joe Bob on Friday nights, and remember fondly going to the video store to get VHS to watch, the only way you could watch movies at the time. I wanted to write a love letter to those people in my life, the people that, my closest friends. I even put two of the names, I remixed the names of two of my closest friends who are big hardcore movie nerds, and put them into the book. And of course, that was a huge thing for them, because they're like, oh my God, we exist in the Stephen King universe. Holy shit. And they flipped for that. So yeah, it was all very much taking this core idea, playing around with it, pouring my love into it. And most of it was actually written in a hotel in Denmark, in Copenhagen, where I was vacationing. And I had to like plow through getting the script for Black Phone 2 written. And Scott was like, you're not allowed to work on any of your side projects. If you are writing Black Phone 2. We are not, dude, that is all you and I are doing right now. And so finally we got that done, and we turned that in. And I've got people tapping on their watch going, do you want to be in the anthology? And I'm like, yes, I do, please. And so I literally wrote most of it on vacation. We'd go out in the mornings and in the evenings to go, do the Copenhagen stuff. And during the afternoons, everybody else would go out on an adventure while I was plowing away at wrong fucking place, wrong fucking time.
It is the only story in the world of The Stand that will explain the continuity of the first 6 or 7 Friday the 13th films to you. If that is a selling point for anyone, it also has a Night of the Creeps reference. It's also a Texas story, which I, as a Texan, I love so much, as a Stu Redman fan and a Texan. Before we go, I want to talk a little bit about you. You have peppered in a lot of really good nuts and bolts writing advice in this conversation, which is something that you are known for, not just in your own podcasting, but also just on social media. You are constantly throwing out reminders to those of us who write that, hey, you could be writing right now. You could get a page in right now. You could get 5 pages in by the end of the week if you just do it one at a time. You are a champion of doing this one foot in front of the other, one word at a time, one sentence at a time. How has your process as a writer evolved over time and getting to do the things that you've been able to do with novels, with screenplays, with short screenplays, which we didn't even talk about the Black Phone VHS crossover that's in VHS 85, which I love. I know about Throbbing Gristle because of you and Scott, because they're in that short.
Oh boy.
And I no,
that's a rabbit hole.
I can't thank you enough. That's been a fun rabbit hole. But with all of the success you've had over the last 15 years, you are still a guy who just has to go in a room and bang the thing out. But how has your personal approach to writing changed, if it has changed?
Oh, dramatically. Absolutely dramatically. And the advice that I give is based upon what I've learned. The thing about all writing advice is all writing advice needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because all writing advice, the one thing that is absolutely true is learning how to write is about hacking your own brain and figuring out what method gets the most words, the best amount of words out of your brain most efficiently. That's all writing is, and learning how to write is. So writing is communicating the emotions and feelings and ideas in your head to somebody else's head. And the quickest, easiest, most efficient way is usually the best way to do it. I started out as a binge writer. You know, my big thing was I was writing on the internet for 10 years. And that was at the time all about speed. And it's, you know, speed was number one. Quality, of course, was very important. But, you know, in the early days, having that one of the early movie reviews up, seeing a screening on Tuesday and having that review up Wednesday morning was the thing. Being one of the first ones out of the gate, having the opinion, you know, the internet was not what it was today. You know, there's not endless options. You went to where you knew you could go. You could, you know, Google was not efficient until halfway through the decade. In fact, what most people forget is in the year 2000, Google was the biggest online search engine and only covered 11% of the internet. 89%. You used to go to 5 different search engines to look for something because each search engine had different results. And so it was a very isolated kind of core thing. So I would be writing to get those reviews in early. And so it was very much go see a movie, drive home thinking about the movie, sit down and write about the movie, turn the review in by 11:30, 12 o'clock, get some sleep, wake up, go to work while the review is up. And that was kind of how it was. And so I became very much a binge writer, sit down and write. Well, when I tried to convert that into writing books, I would have days where I'd write 3,000-4,000 words at a time sitting in the chair. And then the next day I wouldn't be able to write. The next day I wouldn't be able to write. And then I'd write 1,500 words, but it's not as much as I wrote a few days ago. And now I'm behind. And, you know, I used to stress out. And over time, what I learned was what I preach now, which is setting low daily goals. And that the key to being a happy, productive writer is about setting that low daily goal. And for me, as a professional writer, I set that at 3 pages. I recommend if you're starting out 1 page, just 1 page. Or if you really are serious about it, figure out how many pages you can write comfortably in an hour. Because one of the biggest, hardest hurdles we have to get over as writers is getting our ass into the chair. And we will find every reason we can't. I will clean my office. I will do the dishes. I will call my mother. You will find everything. And then it's the end of the day. It's like, I got to write. Oh, I haven't done anything today. Well, you know, if you get it to a small enough amount that you go, you know, if I just sit down and knock out my 3 pages, I'm done for the day and the whole day is mine. And then I can go and do whatever I want. Like I have a whole day ahead of me and I got my writing done. And when you do those 3 pages, if you keep writing, keep going, write 5 pages, write 10 pages, write 20 pages, like go, 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 go. But the next day, you do not compare yourself to that. The next day is your 3-page day. And that I found when I do that, I write every day. I bang out scripts faster than I would if I had set the goal much higher, because there's no procrastination, there's no missed days. I go in, I do my 45 minutes, an hour of work, and if I'm wringing blood from a stone that day, then I just put it down. And I'm like, I'm done. I got it, I hit it, nailed it, got my work done. High five, Cargill, let's go. But if I'm cooking, then I keep cooking, and I'm like, oh hell yeah, let's do a couple more pages. I'm loving this. This is great. I'm having a blast. And so it's a great way to get yourself kickstarted and get the work done. And with me, 3 pages a day, 5 days a week, taking weekends off. That's, even if I hit my minimums, that's 15 pages a week. And after 6 weeks, I've got a complete script.
Yeah.
And you start adding that up and going, well, that's 8-9 scripts a year, if you're not counting rewriting. So it is it really works. And so once I got myself out of binge writing and into a slow, steady, tortoise in the hare situation, I started producing not only more work but better work. I was happier about it. I was doing less rewriting because I was being more thoughtful about what I was putting into those 3 pages. And I've learned just how to have a work-life balance to where I often will be writing and churning out a lot of work, but not feeling like I'm working hard. I don't feel like I've just exhausted myself over the course of a day. And then I have a great day and I feel like, oh man, I haven't gotten anything done this week except 20 pages of a script. I got a fifth of a script sitting there that I got done this week, but I feel like I've been taking the week off. And so finding that work-life balance really kind of course corrected everything with me and turned me into a much happier writer.
I think this is really important. And I know occasionally, as someone who's followed you on social media for a while, occasionally I will see one of your little reminders that you could be writing. And I'm like, fuck, Cargill, really? Like, this is your job. I have other shit to do. I don't need your little platitude right now. But every time you turn out to be right. Which is the my adaptation of this, which I have learned from people like you preaching, like, go slow, it's okay, is that I am a fast enough writer that I know that I can get 500 words in half an hour. If I just sit down and do it, it will be 500 words. They might not be 500 good words, but they'll be there. And like you said, if I go past 500 words, that's fantastic. But if I hit 500, then I've hit 500. And it's because of that ethos, just the applying yourself a little bit at a time, getting in that rhythm and continuing it. Yeah, I always appreciate, even if I don't appreciate it at first, I always appreciate when I have that little bit of Cargill advice telling me, hey, just get your page in. Just do it. You can do it. It's fine. So we're wrapping up here. I want to give you an opportunity. I know that it will have already aired by the time this goes up, but I know you're doing The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs this coming weekend, which will be October 3rd. So if you have Shudder, go catch Cargill on Last Drive-In if you didn't catch it when it first went up. And Black Phone 2 is out October 17th. Right here at the end, will you let everybody know what else you have coming up? As if a feature film and an appearance on a very popular horror movie show is not enough. What else you have coming up and where people can find you online, Cargill?
Well, what else I have coming up? I think that's pretty much it for a while. Thank God. I've had a banner fucking year where you can find me right now spread around. I've got a novella that just came out a few months ago. It's about to come out on, it should be out by now on Audible. You can get it on an audiobook. It's called All the Ash We Leave Behind. It takes place between my 2 books, Day Zero and Sea of Rust. Can be read as a standalone. People have enjoyed it that way. I have a movie that came out earlier this year called The Gorge that you can check out on Apple Plus,
which is fantastic, by the way.
Thank you. I showed up, if you can still find a copy, X-Men number 17. I appear in that along with my buddy Joe Hill as ourselves. That was super fun. You can find me online at on Blue Sky at crobertcargill.bluesky.social. That's where I spend most of my time, social media wise. And as you mentioned, The End of the World as We Know It. Oh, actually, there's one other out there. It's called Haunted Reels 2. We've got a series of books that is a whole bunch of horror filmmakers, mostly indie horror filmmakers, but a couple of us mainstream guys. Mike Flanagan's in the new one. We all wrote horror short stories. And they are great. They're really good stuff. I'm really proud to be in those books. And so that's out there as well. And if you enjoyed listening to my nonsense rambling for the last hour, you can find my podcast, Junk Food Cinema, wherever you get your podcasts.
Our guest has been C. Robert Cargill. Cargill, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks once again to C. Robert Cargill for being on the show as a fellow Austin, Texas area horror guy. It was great to meet him, great to get to know him a little. We really appreciate him taking the time. Black Phone 2 is in theaters October 17th, and as I told Cargill on the interview portion of the show, I really like the Black Phone. I love Black Phone 2. That film hit something in me that just made me just fall in love very early on, and I had a blast watching it. So if you are a fan of the Black Phone, fan of what Cargill and Scott Derrickson do together, or you just like cool horror movies, go see Black Phone 2. It's really good. Also, be sure to pick up The End of the World as We Know It, New Tales of Stephen King's The Stand, edited by friends of the show, Christopher Golden and Brian Keene. That is available now wherever fine books are sold. I highly recommend it. And of course, be sure to follow Cargill on social media. He is great on Blue Sky. He is tons of fun, recommends a lot of great movies, is a huge advocate for horror in all its forms, for indie filmmakers, for obscure horror, for so much other stuff. And he does give good writing advice, even if I don't always want to take his very good writing advice. So be sure to do that. And be sure to follow us over on Blue Sky. We are at scareshapedus.bsky.social. Over there, that is where you will get every episode of the show when it goes up, along with new guest announcements and giveaways and whatever else we have going on. You will hear about it there first, so be sure to follow us over there. We're also The Scares That Shaped Us on Facebook, if you would like to go give us a like over there. We're also The Scares That Shaped Us on YouTube, if that is how you prefer to listen to your podcasts. Head over there, like, subscribe. We appreciate the support. You can also support us by, once again, going to our newsletter, which is at MatthewJacksonWrites.com. Writes with a WRITES. That is where you will find reviews of books, reviews of movies, essays. Right now, a new essay on John Carpenter's Halloween every single day for the month of October, completely free. All you have to do is head over there and read the stuff. I would really appreciate it if you put in your email addresses so that you get everything that I do straight to your inbox. We also have a couple of paid tiers. There's a $1 tier and a $5 tier. If you feel like supporting us that way, please do. If you're unable to do that, we totally understand. Sign up for free. You're still going to get lots of cool content from me over there on a weekly or multiple times weekly basis, or right now a daily basis because I'm doing this crazy Halloween thing. And of course, if you like the show, please head to the podcasting app of your choice and leave us a 5-star review. That helps us get featured, which helps us get more listeners, which helps us get more cool guests like C. Robert Cargill on the show. I will keep doing this show forever if y'all let me. I really appreciate all of your support. If you like the show, tell your friends. Help us keep growing. We're having a lot of fun over here. We will be back next week, October 15th, with a brand new episode. I'm not quite ready to tell you who the guest is yet because we've had a couple of guests whose interviews are lining up. But by the end of this week, we will have a new guest announcement for you. Head over to our Blue Sky page and follow us there to find out who that guest will be next week. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I'm Matthew Jackson, and this is The Scares That Shaped Us.